going. All right. So let's get started. I'll make you a little bit bigger. So for our warm-up, since we're doing mostly passive stretches today, our warm-up's going to be kind of like a little bit easier than normally. We're not going to do a zillion squats. We're going to kind of be using a little bit of momentum. So I like to consider this like sort of passive stretching with movement, even though it's not literally passive. We'll start with some leg swings forwards and backwards. Hand can be on something for balance, or they can just get to the side. Hips don't have to stay square. Leg can be loosey-goosey. Make sure the foot's a little flexed so you don't jam your toes into the ground. Good. And then other leg. Your cat is thinking her great escape. All right, then we're gonna go side to side. So you can give your leg a little bit of a wind up, swing it out to the side. This is awkward to do standing. I recommend having hands on something for balance. It's a really good challenge on. This is my challenging ankle. All right, switch legs, same thing with the other leg. Just a floppy swing. Doesn't have to be crazy high. Getting our body used to moving through a range of motion. So I'm thinking for today, since we're doing a little bit of full body stuff, we're gonna kind of start high, move our way down. So we'll start with shoulders, back, a little extra emphasis on upper back, because that's usually where we need some more love. We'll end with hips. All right, slow down those legs. Let those arms be floppy by your sides. Do some floppy twists. Feet can stay planted, or you can lift your heels. Keep that twist going, but add a little bit of a forward fold. So now it's a windmill. And then back on up to standing, arms circled backwards. I'll just kneel so still in the frame. And forwards. And then arms out to the side, palms up, arms at shoulder height, crisscross and open. We get a little bit of a stretch through the front of the chest, front of the shoulders. Good. And we'll do one arm high, one arm low. And same thing on the other side. Yeah, and I'm gonna do one arm forwards, one arm backwards, making sure our ribs aren't moving for this one, just our arms. The arms still being relatively relaxed. All right, and let's take it down to the floor where you're already at. Give me a couple rounds of cat-cow, arching and rounding the back. Nice, then we'll take it into some circles with our chest. If you want this to be a little more upper backy, you can bend the elbows, try to swoop your chest a little lower. That's gonna be a little bit more like puppy pose position in our back. A little bit more of an arch in the upper back if you choose. And then reverse those circles. Arms can be straight or you can be bending the elbows or a couple of each. And find any comfortable seated position. We'll do a little bit of passive work for our neck, which will also kind of stretch out the tops of our shoulders. So first one, we're gonna have right ear flopping over towards the right shoulder, making sure both shoulders are staying low. So goal is feeling the stretching sensation through the side of our neck. If you'd like a little bit more intensity, we can take our left hand, make a fist and punch it down towards the floor. So that's gonna pull that shoulder blade low. And if this feels good and you want a little bit of movement, we can shake our head no. And you'll notice as our neck is starting to twist one way or the other, that stretching sensation in the side of your neck might get a little bit more intense. So if you find a spot that feels like a better stretch, you can hang out in that position, or you can keep that little bit of movement going. So a lot of what we're doing today, we're going to be doing some longer passive holds. Like I mentioned in the workshop description, we're also going to have a lot of options for little tiny movements like this within the stretch to get our body, particularly our nervous system, more used to coming in and out of the intense stretch, learning over time that this is safe. We can come out of the stretch anytime. We can come into the stretch anytime. And let's roll our head over the other side, left ear towards the left shoulder. Just letting gravity pull our head to the side. Optional addition for extra intensity is pushing that right hand down towards the floor, pulling that right shoulder low. And then other option is slowly shaking your head no while it's flopped to the side. I like to think of this one as the checking my deodorant version of the stretch. Now I'm actually wondering, did I put on deodorant? Yes, I did put on deodorant this morning. I woke up early. It was a long time. My memory doesn't go that far. All right, then I'm going to do head to the front, chin falling to our chest, making sure the rest of our spine is staying nice and tall. So we're not going to let our shoulders start to round forwards as soon as our head drops. So everything all the way up until the base of the neck is nice and vertical, and it's just from the base of the neck to the skull that's starting to round. Optional addition, hands can interlace, and just chill out on the back of the head, letting the weight of our arms add a little bit more pressure, not pulling down with the hands, just relaxing here. And then also optional addition, tiny little no with the head, just real small. Just a centimeter to each side with the nose if that feels nice. Looks good. And go ahead, lift your head up. Last one with the neck, we're going to use our hand for support. So 4 fingers or 3, if you are particularly flexible, are going to go behind our neck. And we're going to start to look up towards the ceiling, pressing our hand into our neck to take some of the weight out of those vertical vertebrae. And just relaxing here for a couple of moments. This is feeling nice. We can shake our head no while we're looking up towards the ceiling. So making a tiny little rainbow with our nose from one corner of the room to the other. If you'd like to go deeper, you can remove a finger. So you've only got 3 fingers supporting your neck. It's a little bit more of an arch. Good. Good. Then go ahead, bring your head back to neutral. We do a little bit for our lats, so the big muscles on the sides of our arm that generally get tight when we're trying to reach our arms overhead. So reach left arm up overhead, palm facing in. Right hand's gonna grab that lift, give it a little bit of a pull. So we're trying to pull our shoulder blade and our upper arm up our back, and a little bit of a lean to the side. So we're gonna try not to lean through our waist. We're more of trying to lift the outside of our armpit towards the ceiling. So sensations we wanna feel is stretching sensation, probably through the outside of the armpit, maybe down into the ribs. If we start to get tingles with the fingers, we can relax that elbow, bend the arm, make a little bit of a fist. Nice. And then movement option here, if you want, would be a teeny little bit of a rotation, chest towards the floor, chest towards the ceiling. So tiny spinal twist, if that feels like a nice addition. And if you notice that there's a spot where you're like, oh, wow, that just got a lot more intense in the shoulders, but it feels satisfying, you're welcome to hold that position, or you can keep that little wiggle going. If this wiggle does not feel good and it feels like it makes things harder, and not in a productive way, you're welcome to just relax and stretch. Then same thing on the other side. So we're gonna reset our torso. Left arm reaching overhead, or sorry, right arm if I'm mirroring you. Left arm is gonna grab, give it a little bit of a tug up, pulling our shoulder blade and that upper arm away from our waist. Tiny tilt to the side, trying to point our armpit towards the ceiling. Finding our lat stretch, outer armpit, maybe down the side body, maybe coming towards the side of our back. Then optional if you want that little twisting movement, rotating our chest towards the floor, towards the ceiling, if that feels like a sensation. Looking good. Really nice keeping that waist lifted. All right, and then slowly back to neutral. Relax those arms. We'll do a little bit of overhead work. So this is still for our lats, but it also start be taking some of our stretches into our upper back. So we'll do a little bit of moments in our puppy pose. So for puppy pose, we're starting on all fours. Butt stays stacked on top of our knees. We reach our arms forwards with straight arms if that feels comfortable. You can bend your elbows if that feels like a lot of pressure on your elbows. And to make sure we're getting a really nice stretch in this one, we're going to take the outside of our armpits and try to wrap them down towards the floor. If this, especially if you've got tight shoulders, feels like a lot of effort to keep you from crashing towards the mat, we can support the weight of our head with the yoga block on whatever height happens to make sense for where your chest is in space or your body proportions. But coming to a version of this stretch where you could have your head on a block or on the floor will make it feel a little less effortful to keep your torso upright. Nice, Steph, that looks great. Other options for these, especially for folks, if you're really comfortable with your head on the floor and you like a deeper stretch, or say if you've got your nose or your chin or your chest on the floor for my contortion friends, you might also want blocks under your hands. Taking a couple breaths. It's gonna give you a little bit more of a stretch in the shoulders. Then just relaxing for a couple of minutes. And if we want a little bit of movement here, why don't we actually take some movement into our hips? So this is going to keep the stretch and the challenge in our upper back and our shoulders. We're going to take the arch out of our low back by tucking our tailbone towards the floor. So if you're a dog, we're tucking our puppy dog tail between our legs and then lifting our tailbone, lifting that tail high. Tucking the tailbone, lifting the tailbone. And you might notice as you tuck the tailbone, it's a little bit more intense in the shoulders because we're removing the arch from our low back, making our upper back and shoulders pick up the slack. When we lift our tailbone, low back gets to arch a little bit more. Maybe you sink a little deeper. So if you want to try to sink this with your breath, we can inhale when we tuck that tailbone, hold a little tension in the shoulders. Exhale when that tailbone lifts, see if we can sink a little lower. Inhale as we tuck. Exhale as the tailbone lifts, just sinks a little lower. Beautiful. Good. And then let's come down onto our backs. We'll give shoulders a little bit of a break, but let's give upper back some love. So I'll show a couple options. Steph has a yoga wheel, so I'll show some stuff on a wheel, but let's start with blocks. And then for folks who have wheels, I will show you some options as well, because yoga wheels are really nice for shoulders and upper back work. But for folks who have blocks, we'll start with 2 blocks on top of each other. And Steph, let me have you do blocks too, just so that I see what this looks like in your back. And then I'll probably give you some more fun wheel options. So we're going to be leaning backwards on the blocks with the very bottom edge of the block right at the bottom of our shoulder. So that's where we're trying to add our support. Butt's going to stay on the ground. Hands will support the weight of our head with elbows pointing together. And we're just going to relax our head towards the floor. If this feels comfortable on your neck, especially if your head is touching the ground, you're welcome to release the hands and relax the arms as well, either overhead or out to the side if you want a little bit of a chest stretch. If that does not feel comfortable on your neck, I suggest keeping the hands on the head to support some of that weight in your neck. Nice. That looks great. So folks who are on blocks, you're welcome to just continue relaxing here. And then Steph, let me have you grab your wheel so we can add a shoulder stretch to this one. So for folks with a body wheel, this might look different in your body, depending how big your wheel is, how much back flexibility you have. But we're gonna start with our butts in the air, and that space at the bottom of our shoulder blades is at the very top of the wheel. If it's comfortable to relax your head backwards, neck can be totally relaxed. If your head does not touch the wheel, go ahead, keep your chin tucked. We're gonna reach our hands overhead. See, can we grab the edge of the wheel? If you can get your hands on the wheel, you're gonna hold as you drop your butt. If your fingers cannot grasp the wheel, they're just gonna be reaching as we drop our butt towards the floor or towards the wheel. Nice, looking good. And Steph, you can also experiment with movement in this one. This is a nice way to kind of ramp up or down the shoulder stretch. by pushing into your feet, almost like you're gonna try to push your elbows towards the floor and then relaxing. So rolling your butt towards the floor and then rolling your elbows towards the floor. So just a little bit of a teeter-totter while you're in this position. And you might notice there's a spot where you're feeling like you're getting a little bit of a better stretch in your back, maybe a little bit of a better stretch in those shoulders. What can you? And then go ahead and slowly come on out. Let's come back to that same puppy pose we were doing. So now our upper backs had a little bit of support with that arching. So we're gonna add some movement for our puppy pose. So I want our hands to be able to slide. So you could do this on a foam roller, you could do this on a yoga wheel. If you don't have those props, I want you to just make sure that your hands can slide on the floor. I'll show it on the wheel first. That's what Steph has, and then I'll show people on our roller. So on your yoga wheel, we're gonna have hands together in prayer pose, and just be conscious how fat or narrow your wheel is. We wanna be able to have our arms to stay on the wheel as we're rolling forwards. So we're gonna be kneeling, hands together in prayer position. We're gonna start to roll our wheel forwards as our chest comes down to the ground. So we're adding that upper back and that shoulder stretch, hanging out of the bottom for just a moment, then pushing our arms into the wheel, lifting our chest, coming out of that stretch. Rolling that wheel forwards, coming into the stretch, rolling the wheel backwards, coming out. So this one's a little bit more active, using that movement. For folks who have a foam roller, you'll be a little bit lower to the ground. Same idea, hands together, rolling the roller forwards, rolling it backwards as we lift our chest up. Folks who do not have something that rolls on the floor, just want to make sure your hands can slide on the ground. So if you've just got carpet, that's probably okay. But if you've got hardwood, you're going to want something under your hands. We'll do palms down as we slide out to that puppy pose stretch. And then bring those palms in as we lift our chest. Arms slide forwards as we drop. Arms slide backwards as we lift. Nice shoulders look great stuff. Taking a couple of breaths. Good. Next one can be the last one. And let's come on down to lying on our stomach. Close my curtains a little bit so we can see more. So we'll keep working on shoulders and we'll add a little bit of a twist for our spine, but now we're gonna be working more in the front of our shoulders, so more of our pecs and our chest. So we're gonna start lying on our stomach, on the ground, right elbow out to the side. Oops, there, now we can see. Elbow bent 90 degrees, starting with the elbow in line with our shoulder. I'm gonna plant my left hand on the floor, somewhere on my left side body, wherever it feels comfortable. And I'm gonna push into that left hand to roll my chest open. So our goal is that right elbow is going backwards in space. We're feeling a stretch either through the right chest or the front of the right shoulder. If at any point you get tingles in the right hand, that means we have pushed too far and we're accidentally compressing a nerve. I want you to come on out, shake it out. Try it again, smaller range of motion with a fist instead of open hands. That can be a little gentler on our nerve. So options here, we can just be breathing in this stretch if that's feeling comfortable. If you want a little bit of movement, we can rock our chest to the floor, lessen the stretch, open our chest to the side, increase that stretch to little tiny rocks. In of the stretch, out of the stretch. Just reminding our body that we've got this whole range of motion that we can move through. Doesn't have to be a huge rock, it can just be a millimeter in each direction, but I want you to find a bit of movement where that stretch gets more intense, and then you back up. Go ahead, rock out of the stretch for a moment, same arm, but we're gonna take that elbow a little higher. So elbow is now above shoulder height, and then we're gonna rock back into the stretch. Notice, does this feel more challenging, less challenging than when you had that elbow in line with your shoulder? So all of the muscles in our pecs, they kind of, the fibers run in different directions. So sometimes it feels different to have the arm at different heights. And same idea on this side. We can do little rocks into and out of the stretch if that feels nice. Or you're welcome to just hold and breathe for a couple of moments. Checking in, see how it's feeling with your chest, see how it feels with the front of that shoulder. Then we'll come out of the stretch. Last one on this side, we're gonna take that elbow lower than shoulder height. So almost like we're making a W side with our arm. Not all the way that it comes in to touch our hip or our ribs. I still want it farther away from your body. So just like an inch or two below shoulder height. And then roll back into the stretch. See how it's feeling over here. And then we can do those little rocks. In and out if that's feeling good. Roll and then roll your chest to the ground. We're gonna switch sides. Taking our left elbow in line with our shoulder, right hand plants on the ground, peeling our chest away from the ground on this new side, finding our stretching sensation either through the side of our chest, maybe the front of our shoulder. Taking a couple rocks into and out of the stretch if that's feeling good, or just holding here and breathing. So we want to check in with our breath, making sure it's still feeling comfortable and controlled. Generally, the slower we can breathe, particularly on the exhales, is one way we can send signals to our nervous system that everything's fine. We're safe in this position. So if you're someone who likes to move those wiggles and you want to play with incorporating your breath, I want you to use your exhales as the moment where you're making that stretch a little bit more intense. Inhaling as we're rocking away, exhaling as we're rocking into the stretch. Letting our body use that nice long exhale to know that we're in control. All right, go ahead, slide that left elbow a little higher than shoulder height, and we'll still just relax in our stretch. Either with those side to side wiggles or just hanging out here. And double checking, making sure we're not getting tingles in the fingers. If we are, we're gonna come on out. Give it a break for a moment. Tingles in fingers or toes when you're doing leg stretches. Generally a sign you're doing something funky to a nerve that we don't want to be doing. Go ahead, rock that chest out. Last one on this side. Scooch that elbow a little lower than shoulder height. Come back into that stretch. We can relax here, or we can add those rocks. And if you're adding the rocks, you're welcome to exhale as you're pushing into the deeper stretch. Inhale as you're lessening that stretch. If you want to try to coordinate it with your breath, see how that feels in your body. And legs can do whatever's comfortable here. I just happen to have my knees because the wall is in the way. We'll do some stuff with our legs in a moment. All right, go ahead, slowly come on back to the middle, chest on the floor. So we're gonna do one last chest stretch on either side, but now we're gonna add a little bit of a twist through our upper and lower back. So arm positions for this one, you get to pick whether this feels better in elbows bent robot arm position, or most people, straight arms is a bit more intense if you want a little bit more of a challenge. So you can pick whichever one feels better for your arms. If I'm mirroring you, we'll start with our left elbow on the floor, either arm straight or bent. Right hand is gonna plant to give us a little bit of a push. And I'm gonna take the opposite side foot, so my right foot, and reach it across my body. So that foot is reaching across to the elbow that is on the floor. If you have your fingers out and you can grab your foot, you're welcome to grab it like a twisty dancer's pose. If that feels nice. So our hips are twisting one way. Good. And then try the other side. We're gonna bring that chest to the floor. Extend our right arm out to the side, either elbow on the floor or whole arm on the floor. Left foot is gonna reach up and over as our hips peel off of the ground. Foot might be dangling in space. It might be on the ground. Might be all the way to the fingers. You've got your fingers on the floor. And let's do a couple side to side. Let me rotate so I don't hit the wall for this one. So we're gonna do a couple of big swoops with our legs. So both arms out to the side, elbows, arms or elbows straight. I'm gonna take my left toes, swoop them out, either dragging them on the floor or floating them in the air towards the right side. Come on back to the middle. Lifting my right toes, swooping them out over to the left side. So if you're dragging your toes on the floor, it's gonna look a little bit like this. Hanging out over on the stretch just for a moment on one side, and then over on the other side. So we're just adding a little bit of a twist. Even though technically it's our hips that are moving, a lot of this twist is coming through our upper back, because our upper back has a lot more range of motion to twist than our lower back does. Step that leg straight. And we'll do one more big leg swoop to each side. And then we'll come onto our back. I want to be in some kind of a supported position where our spine is elevated off of the ground so we can do a little bit more passive stuff for our shoulders. So if you have a foam roller, that will be the easiest and most comfortable thing to use, but I will also show how to do this with yoga blocks. So we want to come to a position where if you've got a foam roller, we're doing a hot dog way, lying on the roller. If it's long, that means our hips, our spine, and our head are on the roller. If you have a short roller, I still want it to be between your shoulder blades, and you might need a block or something under your head if your head doesn't fit on the roller. And we're just gonna relax our arms out to the side. So there's a little bit of space between our shoulder blades and the roller, so our arms can fall to the floor. And you can do this with bent elbows or straight arms. This will probably feel like a very gentle stretch either through your chest or through your shoulders. For folks who don't have a foam roller and only have yoga blocks, I want one block on this skinny width. This is gonna go between your shoulder blades. That's where you want the support. Other block can be under your head, either on the flat height or the tall height, and you have to push into your feet to keep your hips in the air. I don't want this one to be a back bend. We kind of want neutral spine for this one, as arms are relaxed out to the side. So we can either just be relaxing here, taking a couple breaths, or if you want some movement, we can slowly start to drag those arms on the floor overhead, and then slowly start to drag them down towards the sides of our hips, just like you are making the world's slowest and laziest snow angel. Keeping the outsides of those shoulders low, so we're getting a little bit of a stretch through some of those muscles coming through the front of our shoulders. This is really nice for our pec minor, one of the pecs that attaches to the front of our shoulder blades, now that it gets to dangle far backwards a little bit more in space. And if you notice there's a particular arm position, whether that's straight out to the side, down closer to your hips, or closer to overhead, that you're feeling a nicer stretch in the front of your chest or in the front of your shoulders, you can just hang out in that position for a couple of breaths. And then go ahead, slowly come on out. Come on off of your roller or your blocks or your prop. Show me a child's pose. So we get to round that back instead of arching, reaching your hands forwards, either sitting your butt towards your heels, or for folks who that does not feel terribly relaxing, you can sit back towards some yoga blocks. That way your heels can be a little bit lifted. Taking a couple breaths. And let's take this a little bit more into a rounded posture for our back, so we can stretch some of those muscles between that run up and down each side of our spine by bringing our fingers just a little bit closer to our knees. So sliding those hands back, pushing the floor away, tucking our chin. So you're feeling a stretch on some of the muscles running up your side, if that's fine. We want some movement here. We can keep the back rounded, but slightly walk the hands over to the right side. You might notice that the left lower part of your back feels like you're getting a little bit of a stretch. That could be in our QL, one of the muscles that go from our hips to our low back. And then keeping that back nice and rounded, walk those hands over to the left. So we'll go side to side a couple of times, just a little bit of movement, trying to keep that rounded position the whole time. Good. One more time to each side. And let's do one last supported back bend before we start to shift our focus more towards the lower side of our body. So I want you to pick a prop that you can use to support your upper back. So you could do the same thing we did last time with blocks, where you've got blocks beneath your shoulder blades. You're welcome to use a foam roller if you want something a little gentler so that you're lower on the ground. Or for folks who have a yoga wheel, we can have the yoga wheel behind our upper back. So support is right at the bottom of the shoulder blade, but this time we're adding a shoulder stretch with straight arms by reaching our arms overhead and just letting gravity pull our arms towards the floor. For folks on a wheel, you can experiment with lifting your hips so the hands come to the floor, or dropping your hips so those hands are a little farther away and gravity is giving them a little bit more pull. For folks who have a lower support, like if you've got a lot of back flexibility and shoulder flexibility and you're on yoga blocks, and you want this to be a bit more intense, you can take your top block and make it a teeny bit taller by rocking it onto the medium height as you're reaching arms overhead. Nice step, that looks great. I'm gonna just hang out here for a couple of breaths. If you want a little bit of movement, we can add some movement within the shoulders themselves. So lifting those arms up just a little bit. So we're gonna close the shoulders, like you're reaching your pinky fingers towards the ceiling, lessening that shoulder stretch. And then we'll exhale, relax those arms back down. Inhale, lifting those arms just a teeny bit. And then exhale, letting gravity pull them back to the floor. Couple of moments. Keeping that nice arch in our upper back. Beautiful. One last inhale and exhale here. And then we'll slowly find our way off of our support prop. Let's start with, why don't we start with some hamstrings, but we'll do them lying on our backs, make it a little bit more relaxed. So grab some kind of a strap. It can be stiff like the yoga strap I have. It can be stretchy like a TheraBand. We'll start with just good old back lying hamstring stretch. This is one that I'm pretty confident many of you know, but we'll add a little bit of movement and some little pizzazz to this to see if we can make it feel a little happier in those hamstrings. So we'll start with strap on the left leg. Right knee can be bent if you want this to be a little gentler, or flat on the ground if you'd like more of a challenge that typically tilts our hips a little farther away. So we'll start with left toes pointed, pulling that leg towards our torso. So goal is nice, strong stretching sensation through the back of the back, through our hamstrings, without our butt starting to float off of the ground. Nice, good. So from here, we're gonna add 2 different types of movements if they feel good in your body, and you're welcome to disregard if they do not feel particularly good. First one we'll play with is pointing and flexing that left foot. So pointing and flexing the ankle. If flexing the foot feels quite intense, I want you to keep it small. It can just be a little flex. If it feels good and you have a nice stretch in the calf and that feels satisfying, you can make it big. Totally up to you. I have a little bit of nerve tension, so I usually keep this very tiny in my leg. It's making it big makes it uncomfortable. We'll go back to pointing those toes, and then we're gonna do tiny bends and straightens of the knee. So I want you to bend it just enough where that stretch gets a little bit easier, but not so much that you lose the stretch completely. So I wanna keep a stretch in the leg as we bend and straighten. So as we straighten, we're coming more to that end range, that intensity stretch. As we just slightly blend it, we're dialing the intensity back. For folks who have very tight hips, it's okay to start with the knee bent and bend it more. The leg doesn't have to be totally straight, so long as you're feeling nice stretch through the back of the thigh. Look good. We'll go back to straightening that left leg as much as is comfortable. Keep both butt cheeks on the ground, but we're gonna drift that left leg out to the side. So this might start to add an inner thigh stretch if that's a tight area for you. Make sure the right butt cheek isn't starting to lift and your hips are tilting. We still have both hip bones towards the ceiling. And we could either be using our arms to keep the leg up. We could have an arm underneath the leg if it feels it needs some support from the underside. I still want this to feel like a hamstring stretch, an underside of the thigh stretch. So if it only feels like inner thighs for you, kind of pull the foot a little higher so you start to feel it back in the hamstrings, the underside of the thigh. Nice. That looks great. And then from here, we've got those same two movement options. So if they felt good in that first stretch, go ahead, point and flex your ankle a couple of times. It may feel easier out to the side. It may feel harder. And we're going to keep our toes pointed away. Slightly bend the knee just to lessen the stretch a little bit, but not lose it all the way. And go back to straight. So micro bend and then straight. And if things are starting to feel easier over time, go ahead, pull that leg a little higher if it's getting happier with being in this position. Nice. All right, the last version, we're going to take that left leg, bring it back to neutral for a moment. And then we're going to go a little bit past neutral, like we're reaching the toes past the outside of our hip. Not so much that the butt cheek comes off of the floor. Both hips are staying on the ground, but this should feel like a bit more of a stretch through the outside of that leg. And then we'll do that same point and flex through the foot. Be a little bit more careful on this one, because sometimes the flexing can feel more intense. If you're getting like a really intense zing through the outside of the leg, make that flex a little smaller. We're doing more of pointing and then pointing a little less as opposed to really flexing that ankle 90 degrees. And then with the toe point, we'll slightly bend that knee, make that stretch easier, and then kicking it back straight, making it more intense. So easing in and out of our end range. And we'll go ahead, bring that left leg back to neutral. So our leg is in line with the left side of our body. If it's feeling a little better, since we've been in this stretch for a long time, you can see, can you pull it a little closer to your torso? And we'll hold for just a couple more breaths. And if you want to try to link this one to your breath, we can inhale, bend that knee just a teeny bit, make that stretch easier to prepare. And then we're going to exhale, straighten that leg as we pull it in a little bit. Inhale, lessen the intensity just a little bit. And then exhale, pulling that leg back to straight. Couple of times, little micro bend. And then straightening on the exhale. Yes. And you can release that left leg, lose the strap. Give it a shake out if it needs a shake break. And then we're doing the same thing with the right. The strap will go on that right foot. Left knee can be bent or it can be flat on the ground. For folks with tighter hamstrings, totally okay if the starting position is having that knee bent. And our goal for this one is feeling a pretty intense stretch through the back of that thigh as our starting point. You get to pick whether that's slightly bent knee or leg all the way straight. And just like the first side, if it felt good to point and flex the foot, you can experiment with that little ankle movement on the side. So two things the pointing and flexing is doing. Number one, when we flex the foot, we get a little bit of calf stretch. So we should be feeling more of a stretch through the lower part of the leg. What it also does is it gives a little bit of a mobilization through the sciatic nerve in the back of our leg, which for some people will feel good. It's going to feel like a nice productive stretch. For some people, it's not going to feel great. So if it just makes it really, really intense when you flex your foot, that likely means you have a little tension in that nerve. And I would like you to keep it gentler. You just flex the foot a little bit. Just work on a little bit of ankle movement. More is not necessarily better. Listen to your body, listen to the intensity of the sensations you're feeling. I'll go back to pointing toes, slightly bending and straightening. So we're staying in a stretch the whole time, but we're going from like 9 out of 10, 10 out of 10, this is pretty intense, dialing it back to maybe a 6 out of 10. So seeing how much movement do you need to still keep a stretch in the back of the leg as we're dialing it up and dialing it down. And then with that leg as straight as is comfortable, we'll start to drift it out to the side, either dangling it in the air with the strap, maybe having a hand under the outside of the leg to support the weight. So this might add an inner thigh stretch. It might not, depending on your inner thighs. I do want to keep it a hamstring stretch. So if this just got much easier in your hamstring, pull that foot a little higher. For those of you who have happier hamstrings in the straddle position. And then we'll point and flex the foot, just like a moment ago. And then with those toes pointed, slightly bend and straighten the knee. And then keeping that leg straight, we're gonna bring it back to neutral. And then past neutral, reaching the foot just to the outside of that left hip. So we're feeling a little bit of an extra stretch in the outside of the leg. And then a little bit of pointing and flexing through the ankle, if that feels okay intensity-wise. If the flexing feels a lot more intense in the outside of the foot, keep it smaller, or just keep those toes pointed and breathe here. And then double check that you can feel the back of both hip bones on the floor. Steph, you look good. That's more of a reminder for everyone in the future who is watching the recording. Hello from the past. And we'll keep our toes pointed and then little bends and straightens of that. So bending, lessening the intensity, straightening, coming back to that nice intense stretch. Then with that leg straight, we'll do one last regular stretch with that leg in line with our side body. So bring it back to neutral. I'll get it as close to your chest as you can. So you might have gotten a little extra range of motion just with some of those movements and stretching it from a couple different angles. We'll hold here for a couple more breaths. Optional extra challenge if you want to play with your breath on this one is inhaling, lessening the stretch a little bit, making it a teeny bit easier, and then exhaling, trying to pull that foot straight, pulling the knee straight by pulling the strap out of the foot. Inhaling, lessening the intensity, exhaling, maximum intensity. So can we go a little bit deeper? Inhale, prepare, and exhale, deepen that stretch. Go ahead, release that right foot. Give the right leg a shake out if it needs a little shake break. So that was a whole lot for the back of our thighs. Let's do a little bit for the front of our hips, both our hip flexors and our quads. Why don't we do this in a pigeon pose? Just because a lunge can be a lot of pressure on some people's knees. So I want you to be in a pigeon with the left leg forwards, right leg backwards, but a version that feels like you could chill out here for a couple of minutes. If at any point you feel like one of your feet is falling asleep, go ahead, come on out and shake out your legs. But things that we can do to make this a little bit more comfortable for holding for a long time is instead of having our butts totally on the floor, we can put 1 or 2 yoga blocks under our left butt cheek. So our hips are a little higher. So we can sit here a little bit longer, put our left butt going to sleep. And we're gonna make our way to some kind of a quad stretch. So depending on your flexibility, if you can reach back and grab that right foot and pull it towards your butt, go ahead and do that with your hand. If you cannot reach, you might want a strap on that ankle, pulling that foot towards your butt. So goal for this one is stretching sensation through the front of that right thigh. Nice, stuff looks great. For folks who are pretty comfortable holding onto that foot, we can make this more intense by, of course, pulling the foot close to our butts. The other thing we can do to make this more challenging, which moves some of the stretch from our quads to our hip flexors, is to sit up super duper tall. Shoulders over our hips, tucking our tailbone down towards the floor. So that's going to give us a little bit more of a stretch through the front of the hip crease, as well as in the quads themselves. For folks who want a little bit of a gentler stretch, you can lean forward, hand on your floor. You might be able to make this more intense in your quads, but less intense in that hip crease itself. So pick the version that's feeling like a nice version of intensity for you. Okay, good. And then let's add a little bit of movement. We're going to use our arm for this one, so that way leg gets to stay totally relaxed. We're we're just gonna let that foot fall a little bit farther away, lessen the intensity of the stretch, and pull it back towards our butt. A little bit more intense. Dialing down that intensity, and then pulling that foot back. Deep stretch. So if you want to connect this to the breath, we can inhale as we lessen the stretch. Exhale, see can you pull that foot any closer to your butt. Inhaling, relaxing and preparing. Exhaling, that's great. 2 more breaths here. Go ahead, release that back foot. We'll switch sides. So we're gonna kick left leg backwards. Right knee is gonna come forwards. You're welcome to sit your butt on the ground if that's comfortable. I have a strong preference for doing this with one or both yoga blocks under my butt so that I can give those hips a little bit of support. And once you feel like you've got your hips somewhere comfortable, we can reach back with our hand to grab the left foot or use a strap. Leaning forwards will make this a teeny bit more comfortable. Sitting upright, torso totally vertical. Tuck in our tailbone will make it a little bit more intense. So you get to pick the version that's feeling productive. And we'll just take a couple of breaths. If you'd like to add that little bit of movement, we can exhale. See, can you pull that heel a teeny bit closer to your butt? And then inhale. Let that foot go. Exhale, put that foot close to our butt as we relax. Inhale, let that foot go. And with every exhale, that foot can come into a slightly deeper version of the stretch, but trying to keep a nice strong stretch through the front of that thigh the whole time. 2 breaths on the side. And last one. Right, go ahead, release that foot. Come on out of your pigeon. Let's keep working on the front side of our hips. So we're gonna make our way to some version of a reclined hero pose. So if you're someone who can comfortably sit on your heels in this one, great starting point. For folks who this just hurts your ankles and knees to think about, sitting on one or both of your yoga blocks will make it a little bit more comfortable. Feet can be in whatever position is more comfortable for you. So you can have your toes tucked, you can have your toes pointed, whatever feels better for your ankles. But our goal for this one is to feel a stretching sensation through our quads, the front of our thighs, and maybe go into the front of our hips if that feels comfortable for you. So if this isn't feeling like much of a stretch to start with, we're gonna start leaning backwards in space until we're starting to feel a stretch through the front of our legs. So some people are gonna be pretty comfortable bringing your elbows to the floor. Some people might be able to comfortably lie down all the way on your back. Some folks are going to be considerably more lifted, particularly if you have very tight quads. This is not something that a lot of people can just melt into off of the get-go. Nice, step back, good. And then other option for you, Steph, since you've got the wheel, this is another one that can be nice to kind of combine with a little bit of a fish pose action with the wheel on the upper back. So similar support spots where we had it before, kind of base of our shoulder blades at the top of the wheel, arms reaching overhead, and our butt is relaxed low. And for movement, you can experiment with lifting those hips, almost like you're coming to, if this would be a little bit kind of like a low camel, and then dropping our hips back down. Lifting the hips up, dropping them back down. For folks who don't have a body wheel, you can do that same support with yoga blocks if you are lowered enough to the ground. Or if you're not low enough to the ground, we can be on hands or elbows, doing those tiny little hip lifts and lowers. So that will make it more active. So as the hips come up, it's going to be a little bit more intense. As they drop, that intensity is going to go down. Good. Couple more breaths here, with or without movement. You get to pick. Good. And then go ahead, slowly find your way out of our reclining hero slash fish. You had a little bit of support under that upper back. Keep the legs a little shake out if they need it. So it's front side of the legs, a little bit of break. We're gonna do some love for our inner thighs because we haven't done much for them yet. We're gonna make our way out to our frog stretch. So frog stretch, our knees are bent out to the sides. You can choose whether feet are in line with knees, or for some people, you're gonna be more comfortable with your feet closer to each other. I want you to pick the version that feels like you get a nice stretch in your inner thighs and you're not just getting pinching in the outsides of your hips. If bringing the toes in doesn't help, you can think about lifting your butt as high in the air as you can. That tilts your hips forwards, and for some people, gives you a little bit more space in the hip joints. We're going to be holding here for probably close to a minute. So this is going to be a bit of a longer stretch. Things we can do to lessen the intensity and make this more relaxing are potentially having blocks under our inner thighs for support on whatever height happens to match where your hip height is on the floor. We can also have blocks under our arms or under our belly, or I am a big fan of blocks under my armpits and shoulders. So I don't have to use my arms to support my body weight because frankly, my shoulders are some of the things that get the most tired while I am in my froggers and my middle splits. So you can choose some support that's feeling nice. For folks who have a larger chest, you might not want the blocks directly under your chest. That's why armpits can be nice. But for folks with a smaller chest, sometimes the chest support can feel nice because it takes a lot more weight out of our hips. So hanging out, a couple of breaths here. And if you want to take that support away and add a little bit of movement, you can do some little hip rocks forwards and backwards. And just noticing how that changes the intensity of what we're feeling in those inner thighs. So for a lot of people, sending your hips backwards towards the feet makes that intensity ramp up a little bit. Going forwards, it dials it down a little bit. Some people are the opposite, going forwards a little bit more challenging. It's going to depend a little bit on your hip anatomy. Just adding a little bit of that movement, just like before. Saying, can you make this stretch a little bit more intense and a little less intense? Same idea, we can rock side to side. So rocking side to side gives us a really small tilt to the pelvis, so it might make the stretch more intense in one leg, less intense in the other leg. We can also do little tiny movements and tilts with our pelvis. This one's a little hard to do at our end range, so if you want to try this one, I suggest bringing your knees a little closer to start, so our hips are a little higher, so we have some more room here, and then you can go deeper if you'd like. But just like when we do in cat-cow, we're gonna try to tuck our tailbone and lift our tailbone. Hip bones tilt backwards, hip bones tilt forwards. Well, we've got that inner thigh stretch. Just noticing how that's changing the sensation you're feeling in those inner thighs. And if that's feeling easy, you can slide those knees a little farther apart and see, can you still keep that little bit of movement in your pelvis? If you like the hip tilts and you want a challenge, you can imagine that there is a paintbrush sticking out of the back of your butt and see, can you paint a circle with your tailbone paintbrush? That's a mix of the side to side tilts and the up and down ones. Oh man, I could do it in one direction. The other direction, I'm pretty sure I just stop and keep going the direction I was doing before. It's always baffled me, the coordination challenge of this one. Nice. All right, try a couple of the other direction if you're doing those circles. This is also a fun one to do in a lunge, which we didn't do today, but especially for those of you who are kind of like working on your nice square hip awareness, going through these circles can be a fun way to do that. All right, find a way to slowly come out of your frogger. That was a longer hold than I anticipated. I got distracted by our butt circles. Come down to on your back. Give your legs a little shake out if you need a shake break. We'll end with a little bit of work for the outside of our hips. So mostly glutes and some of the smaller muscles in the outside of our hips because they haven't gotten much love yet. So we'll do a little figure 4 action. Crossing left ankle over the right knee. If this already feels intense, particularly if you have tight glutes, you can hang out here. You want to up the intensity, we can pull that right thigh towards our torso. So our goal is feeling a stretching sensation through the outside of that left hip. If you like to multitask, you can straighten that right leg so you're getting a hamstring stretch as well. If you just want to focus on the left hip, you can keep that right knee bent. We're going to take a couple of breaths here. For folks who have a lot of flexibility in this range of motion, you're welcome to use your hand or your forearm, kind of whatever fits, to gently press that left knee away from your torso as you're pulling the shin in. That is an option. You've also got the option for a little bit of a rock side to side. So trying to keep the back of our shoulders on the ground, that is a little bit of a twist through our hips and our lower body. Just noticing how that feels intensity-wise on the outside of our hips. Feel more intense when the hips are twisting over to the right, over to the left. Maybe you want to hold a teeny bit of that seated twist. Or maybe you want a little bit of that rocking motion, the whole time. Other options, especially if you kind of want to go in and out of the stretches, we can make some circles with that right knee. So as we let that knee drift farther away, that stretch gets less intense. As we circle it towards our chest, it's going to get more intense. So using your arms to come in and out of the more intense version of the stretch. And then go ahead and release. We'll switch sides. You can shake out your legs if they need a shake break. Then we'll come back to right knee on top of that left leg, either chilling out here, or we can pull that left leg towards our chest. So feeling a stretch through the outside of the right butt. Optional addition would be right hand or forearm pushing that knee away if you're someone who needs a little bit more intensity here. If you've got a lot of flexibility, we can also rock those hips side to side like we did on the first side. You can do that for folks who are watching the recording if you still got your foot on the floor. I actually find that even more relaxing, even though it's a less intense stretch. Or if you liked doing the circles, we can make a nice big circle with that left knee, circling it towards our chest. Out to the side, down to the bottom of the mat, over to the other side, back to the chest. So a little bit of a combination of our side to side rock, as well as coming in and out of the stretch. Then go ahead and release both legs. Give them a little bit of a shake out if they need it. And then we're gonna plant feet about mat width apart or wider on the floor and let our knees start to cave in towards each other. This is a little passive internal hip rotation. So if this feels uncomfortable in your knees or is kind of intense, bring your feet closer together so that your knees can touch like you're making a little lean-to. If this feels very easy and you'd like more intensity, feet can be farther apart so those knees are caving to the ground just with gravity without touching each other. Hold in for a couple breaths. We rarely stretch passively our internal hip rotation. This one feels kind of funky. If you haven't worked it before. And then we'll do the opposite, external hip rotation, bringing the soles of our feet together. And you can experiment with having feet super close to your butt or feet really far away. We're going to relax the knees to the outside. And seeing how it feels with the feet a little closer, feet a little farther away. If you get any discomfort in your knees, your arms can support the weight of your legs, or you can put blocks under your knees. That fits. You're also welcome to separate your feet. That feels better, but whatever version I've got. Nice and relaxed knees, flopping out to the side. Oh. And then go ahead and make your way to some position where you can start taking a little rock side to side for movement. That could be bending your knees as you rock side to side, a little leg. For someone who likes happy baby in yoga, you're welcome to kick your feet towards the ceiling and rock side to side like that. If you like twists, you can have knees together, feet together, hips rocking side to side, shoulders staying in the same spot. Many options. If it feels okay on the ground, you can add forwards and backwards, which is my new favorite happy baby challenge because it's a lot harder when we've got our knees in. But if you're on a floor that does not feel great, keep going side to side. And then whenever you're ready, you can rock yourself back on up to sitting. All right. Awesome job, Steph. Thank you for being my fearless model all class long. Really great job with all the yoga wheel stuff. Do you have any questions on anything that we did?
No, it felt great. And I thank you for the block support under the shoulders during the
Oh, isn't it nice?
I'm like, my shoulders always fatigue during that. Why have I never thought to support with
Yeah,
block?
especially like I'm lucky that my hips are open enough that I'm quite close to the floor nowadays. Like normally I can middle split on a good day, but especially like when I started my splits training, middle splits were the worst, and it was always my arms that got sore, and of course my legs didn't feel great the whole time. But once I realized that I could take some weight out of the shoulders, I could actually relax into the stretch and go like deeper over the course of a minute. It was such a game changer for me. So
Yeah.
I'm a big
Like
fan of shoulder blocks.
I'm ready to spend more time in frog now.
Yay! Oh, love to hear it. Cool. Well, so thank you for joining. For folks watching the recording, feel free to email me questions. If you've got questions on any of the drills or want feedback on anything, I'm happy to answer that. But otherwise, have a fabulous rest of your Sunday. I'll see you later.
Thank you.
Bye.